Top 10 Best Movies of 2023 so far. 2023 has been a great year for cinema, full of sequels, but also of new proposals that could mark the beginning of a new era in the film industry. From video game adaptations to nuclear bombs, these are the top 10 movies of 2023 so far, based on audience opinion and box office. Number 10. Tetris. Let's begin with a movie you may not have heard much about, but the video game on which it is based needs no introduction. As popular and fun as Tetris is, it's almost impossible to adapt it, not to mention a live-action film. Or is it? Well, Tetris by John S. Baird tells us the real story behind the video game and misfortunes that the creator Alexei Pajnitov and the American businessman Hank Rogers had to go through to distribute the product all over the world. And why was that complicated? I mean, it's just a video game. Well, the film is set in the late 1980s, when the Cold War was coming to an end, but the Soviet Union wasn't going to let such a valuable asset leave its borders so easily. Starring Taron Egerton, this story explores the various aspects of the espionage and political thriller that surrounded the distribution of Tetris, but also leaves room for the geeks, with references to the early days of the video game industry, and a soundtrack that evokes nostalgia. You'd never think a Tetris movie would keep you at the edge of your seat. Number 9. Sound of Freedom. In an era dominated by sequels and blockbusters, Alejandro Monteverde's Sound of Freedom has made a space for itself among the best of the year, especially for the great repercussion it has caused in social media. I would even say that was its marketing tactic. This film marked Jim Caviezel's return to worldwide stardom after his career fell into decline after playing Jesus Christ in 2004. In Sound of Freedom, Caviezel plays Tim Ballard, a former U.S. federal agent who abandoned his career to dedicate himself to a dangerous mission: to enter the criminal world of Latin America to rescue hundreds of defenseless children from illegal trafficking. Beyond the conspiracy theories that the story is a reflection of what goes on in the darkest corners of the upper class, the film itself is quite solid, with a sober but not tiresome narration that deals delicately with such a delicate subject as child trafficking. Of course, it shows the worst side of some people, but it also emphasizes that there will always be those willing to fight against such evil. Number 8. Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. With a cast of stars like Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, Justin Smith, and Hugh Grant, just to name a few, it's a shame that this adaptation of a famous Dungeons & Dragons board game flopped at the box office. But that doesn't mean it's bad. Not at all. The premise in a nutshell is about a father trying to rescue his daughter with the help of his closest allies, and some who join in along the way. It sounds simple, but in the vast world of Dungeons & Dragons, there are countless amazing characters, fearsome enemies, and adventures based directly on the board game. That setting, with a team of dysfunctional heroes and a touch of comedy, gave us one of the best fantasy films of recent times. A genre that has been slowly fading, but proposals like those of John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein show that it still has a lot to give. And yes, there are dragons. Number 7. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. Age is just a number for Tom Cruise, and he continues to prove it with his role as Ethan Hunt in the Mission Impossible saga. In this installment, the narrative tapped into some of society's current fears to introduce an AI with the power to control almost anything connected to the network, including government and intelligence agencies. With Christopher McGuire and Tom Cruise as the star, this nearly 3-hour, $300 million mega-production offers all the giddiness, adrenaline, and tension, but also the wit, symphony, and charm of the best Hollywood tradition. If Top Gun: Maverick had already been a pleasant surprise for many cinephiles, Dead Reckoning is an ode to action cinema, with a lot of incredible stunts that only someone as crazy as Tom Cruise can do. Nah, just kidding, Tom. We love what you're doing for cinema. We're already looking forward to Part 2, and if you haven't seen the first one yet, what are you waiting for? Number 6. John Wick Chapter 4. And since we're talking about action, let's go with another great representative of that genre, Keanu Reeves. The story of John Wick seemed to have come to an end in the third part, but Baba Yaga never sleeps. As for the plot, well, we're not gonna lie, it's a new excuse for John Wick to fight against almost everyone. But that's the charm of this saga, and the storyline isn't forced at all. What makes this installment different from the others is that it's a culmination, loaded with climax after climax, that also makes it the most brutal film in the saga. Plus, a cast of action stars like Donnie Yen and Scott Adkins. John Wick was already quite persecuted in Parabellum, although in this story, they far surpass the number of assassins and enemies that he faces. There are indeed moments that may seem exaggerated, but come on, we're talking about action movies. The film makes all that clear from the very first moment, forgetting any kind of realism in favor of the search for a continuous catharsis that culminates with a clear taste of goodbye. Number 5. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Farewells are always hard, but when it comes to characters written by James Gunn, they hurt even more. We all wanted the third film of Marvel's mystical Guardians of the Galaxy, but at the same time, we didn't, because we knew what the outcome was going to be. Besides the fact that James Gunn gives importance to each character, even to the secondary ones, Star-Lord seemed to be the protagonist of the saga. But this time, he took a step aside to show that this story was always about Rocket. If the cast was already superb, in the third installment, they were joined by Will Poulter as Adam Warlock, and Chukwudi Iwuji as the High Evolutionary, a villain less known than Thanos or the Green Goblin. But Iwuji's performance puts him at the top of the best of the MCU. Action, music, and heart. The three basic ingredients that James Gunn has printed in this group of superheroes that is more like a family that we have grown up with. And now it's time to say goodbye. But how gratifying is it to see that everyone had a proper closure? Number 4. The Super Mario Bros. Movie. Video game adaptations have always been a difficult subject in Hollywood, but in recent times, we've enjoyed games like Arcane, the Sonic live-action films, and the Last of Us series. If those productions already had arguments to break the curse of video game adaptations, the Super Mario Bros. Movie ended all doubts, giving us an adventure for the whole family that encapsulates all the essence of the most famous plumbers in history, from Studio Illumination and directors Aaron Horvath and Michael Jelinek. This story has everything from smooth and beautiful animation to simple but effective character construction. And don't even get me started on the voice cast, led by Jack Black, who stole the show with his version of Bowser. While kids have loved this movie, I dare to say that it is dedicated to adults who grew up with the first consoles of Nintendo and Mario Bros. Adventures, loaded with references and musical themes that only they will understand. But then again, everyone will enjoy this movie. Its more than $1.3 billion at the box office backs it up. Number 3. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Aside from Mario, 2023 has also been a great year for animation, with films like TMNT Mutant Mayhem and Nimona. But the one that takes the crown is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the sequel to Miles Morales' saga launched in 2018. If the first part exceeded expectations at the time, Across the Spider-Verse was a massive success, both at the box office and in cinematic quality, to the point that it can be considered one of the best superhero movies ever made. Many people don't take that statement seriously because it is animated, but precisely for being animated, it's so outstanding. After a few years as the only Spider-Man in this universe, Miles finds himself involved in a new and much bigger adventure involving hundreds of Spider-Mans and villains that quickly escalates to become a multiversal threat. While the appearance of so many arachnid heroes is already appealing, including those from the other media such as live-action movies and animated series, the best part is that the main characters and their worlds have their own animation style, creating a visual spectacle enhanced by the moral conflicts of its protagonists and what it really means to be Spider-Man. Undoubtedly, an ambitious proposal that not only seeks to win the Oscar for Best Animated Film, but aspires to much more. Number 2. Barbie. In its beginnings, the Barbie brand was born as a doll that wanted to teach little girls that they didn't have to prepare to be mothers if they didn't want to. Now, more than 60 years after its creation, Barbie arrives with a movie that challenges current gender roles. Directed by the brilliant Greta Gerwig, this story is presented in a cute wrapper full of the magic of Barbie dolls and playsets. But in reality, it's an existential journey that questions the social stereotypes of men and women. With a cast of Barbies and Kens led by Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, the film navigates complicated issues through its pink charm and its naive humor. But it doesn't stop at making its message clear and raising its voice about the things we are failing at as a society. That, coupled with a star-studded soundtrack and beautiful cinematography, gave us a movie that is not just about Barbie, but about all of us. Number 1. Oppenheimer. With only a few months remaining until the end of 2023, I dare say that no film will ever surpass Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan has done it again, proving that it is still worth going to the theater. And what better way than to enjoy what may be his greatest production so far? Based on the book American Prometheus by Kai Bird and Martin J. Sherwin, this film tells the story of Robert Oppenheimer, the physicist responsible for the Manhattan Project and the creation of the infamous atomic bomb. Although the premise sounds a lot like a biopic, and it certainly has some of that, the film flirts with several genres, from political thriller to horror, accompanied by a soundtrack that is impossible to describe it in words alone. After working multiple times with Nolan, Cillian Murphy finally got the chance to play the lead, and while it was an extremely complex role, he fulfilled the task with excellence. But Oppenheimer didn't accomplish such a feat on his own, which is why the film is literally stuffed with big names like Robert Downey Jr., Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Florence Pugh, and many more actors who had their moments to shine. With a narrative in which dialogue was the main resource, Nolan was able to create an unprecedented experience in theaters with almost no CGI and with an ambivalent message that will make you marvel at what science can create but also destroy.
Do you agree with our list? Let us know your picks in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching another video. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay tuned.